Okay, hello, my name is Martin Graff. I'm Reader in Psychology at the University of Glamorgan. My research interests are cyber psychology, which is how people use the internet, and also psychology of relationships. And today I'll be talking to you about whether you can find true love on the internet and other such related things, such as how we flirt online, how we form relationships online, and the ways in which people portray themselves online in terms of whether they or not they might misrepresent who they are and how they look online. So firstly then, let's look at relationship initiation face-to-face. The research says that we go through several stages. For example, when we're in a bar or in a cafe or somewhere and we would like to look for somebody, the first thing we do is have to approach them, obviously. After that, there's a phase of what we call swivel and synchronize, where when people have met, they get together, they synchronize their movements, and this sort of synchronizing the movements tends to sort of facilitate rapport. After that, there's a stage of touch where people tend to talk to each other more, they listen to what the other person is saying, they engage in what's called mutual disclosure of information, and they might sort of share jokes and little bits of humour. Relationship initiation online is rather different because there is no physical appearance online. Therefore, people have to rely on talking and on humour, which I'll come on to in a minute. Physical appearance is obviously absent online to some extent, and people have to describe how they look. Males tend to rate physical attractiveness of females as being more important in online interactions, whereas females tend to rate, in terms of importance, how healthy and how wealthy and how dominant males are. Okay, so there's a gender difference in how males and females represent themselves online. When we've seen profiles of people online, then we engage maybe in chat with these people. Over time, we find this chat to be rewarding. We find chat with other people to be rewarding, and when we're engaging in this chat, we tend to disclose more information. We know from research that people to whom we disclose, we tend to like more, and we like people more who disclose more information to us. So this disclosure is a very, very important part of relationship initiation. We know also that males tend to disclose information ahead of females. Okay, so this disclosure then facilitates a degree of rapport, and when there's rapport, then this might lead to face-to-face meeting. The next thing I wanted to talk about was online flirting. There are two things I wanted to mention here, which is humour and also maybe how we use our bodies online. So firstly then, use of humour. And we all say that we're attracted to people with a good sense of humour, males and females. However, there is a distinction to be made between humour production, which is preferred by females, in other words, females like males who make jokes, whereas humour appreciation is preferred by males. In other words, males like people, especially females, who laugh at their jokes. So there's a difference then between humour production and humour appreciation. Research which has looked at dyadic interactions between males and females has suggested that the amount of laughter, for example, produced by females is more predictive of sexual interest, more so than the amount of laughter produced by males. So this kind of backs up what I just said about the differences between humour production and humour appreciation. One explanation for this is that humour production by males is indicative of creative intelligence. If people display creative intelligence, then that suggests they have good genes. If people have good genes, then they're more attractive. So therefore, humour production is linked with being seen as being attractive. Secondly, we use our bodies in online flirting. For example, people don't just use text-based messages, but they also add to these emoticons, acronyms, which add special meaning to the message. So this, research has suggested, is the ways in which we use our bodies to create more meaning in the messages we're trying to convey. Next, I said I'd talk about whether we can actually find true love online. In other words, can people who've met online sustain these relationships in a face-to-face context? And research tends to suggest that there are 4 salient features which predict whether relationships which have been formed online can be sustained face-to-face. The first is where people meet. In other words, the type of website they used and whether this caters for their mutual interests. And we know also in face-to-face encounters that people who have similar interests are more likely to be attracted than those who don't. Secondly, it's what people do together. In other words, when people engage in online interactions, if they're going to form a romantic relationship, then obviously there has to be a degree of compromise. One person has to move to go and live with the other person, and this willingness to do this is obviously again predictive of the success of the relationship offline. Thirdly, taking time to get to know each other online before people actually meet face to face is again predictive of whether that relationship can be sustained face to face. Fourthly, good communication is another predictive factor of whether relationships which have begun online can be sustained face to face. In other words, people's skill at long distance communication, how they handle disagreements and so on. Therefore, those four things, where people meet, what they do together, taking time to get to know each other, and good communication, are all salient features in whether relationships which have begun online can be sustained face to face. Finally, I'm going to talk about how people portray themselves online. In other words, whether people misrepresent information about themselves online in order to secure dates. Well, we know from the research that there are gender differences in the ways in which males and females misrepresent themselves online. For example, we know that females misrepresent themselves more in terms of their appearance, in terms of what pictures they use, than do males. Whereas males are more likely to misrepresent information about themselves in terms of their current relationships and in terms of things like their socioeconomic status and in terms of wealth and power. Also, we know that people are more likely to misrepresent themselves when they think they're talking to somebody more attractive than when they think they're talking to someone who is less attractive. Let's look then at the characteristics of online communication. There are differences in the ways in which we communicate online as opposed to the ways in which we communicate face to face. Online communication can be asynchronous. We can post messages and not expect replies from the other person maybe for some time. Therefore, there is no feedback from that person immediately on how they are perceiving our message. Secondly, there's a degree of fantasy online. People tend to think of online interactions as kind of a game type of environment. Online, there's a minimization of authority and status. We don't perceive any non-verbal cues. We don't perceive what clothing people are wearing. There is no embarrassment, and there's what we call an equalizing effect. People perceive that the person with whom they're interacting is equal to themselves. When we're interacting online, there's also a feeling of invisibility, that other people can't see us. Also online, there's a feeling of anonymity. In other words, we feel that people don't know that we are on the other end of that online communication. All of these things, asynchronicity, fantasy, minimization of authority and status, invisibility and anonymity, leads to what's called the online disinhibition effect, which to some extent tends to account for the ways in which we act online and how that differs from the ways in which we act face to face. In conclusion, the internet does allow us the facility to misrepresent information about ourselves online. It allows us maybe to flirt online. Overall, though, the evidence does suggest that we can find true love online.